Welcome to another episode of the Small Biz Pulse. We are here with Scott Woods today. How are you, Scott?
I am doing great, Brian. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. And you are brother to Pat Woods from Factory Sports in Lois, Delaware.
I am. I am. He's definitely my better half of the crew for sure.
And you are also in the business world. You actually do some business advisement. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, of course. Let me start by the name because people often get tripped up on the name. The name of my company is called Advocatus Consulting. And picked that name specifically. Advocatus is Latin for come to the aid of, helper, friend, counselor, and also the origin of the word advocate. And I really think that describes our business really, really well. We come to business owners who are either in growth mode or in having a problem with something, and really helping them maximize not only their profitability but also their impact, because I really think there's an untapped or an unthought of business rule that people get into business because they want to help people. Even the most heartless, money grubbing capitalist, which, be perfectly frank, I don't think there's a lot of those in reality. They all got into business because they wanted to help. They felt like they could fill a niche. So our job is to help those business owners and executives get back to what they're passionate about, get back to helping them maximize their impact, maximize their profitability, and maximize their value for both their customers and for their employees. So I've got 25, almost now, believe it or not, almost 30 years of experience as a CFO and COO of privately held businesses. So over the course of my career, I've really learned and been able to extract certain aspects, attitudes, and attributes that business owners that are successful have. So I've been able to use those experiences and those attributes to really help businesses do what they do better, to really help you have an impact in the community and also make some money.
Now, you work with many companies now. You're not just the COO or CFO of one individual company. You're helping lots of different companies. What types of companies are you working with? Other
Yeah,
than
that's
you mentioned the companies that are in their growth stage, but
yep.
what specific types of companies?
Yeah, it's interesting because I get this question a lot. What specific industries do you work with? And I hate to say this because it seems to be self-serving, but I really truly believe we're kind of industry agnostic. Over the course of the years, leading organizations in a variety of industries, I've had a number of jobs before I started this business. Whether it's a custom cabinet maker or an international nonprofit, both of whom are customers of mine now, all industries, all business owners, especially if you're privately held, they all have the same concerns. How do I manage my cash flow? How do I manage and motivate my employees? And how do I maximize the impact? So while I have experience in distribution, professional services, I can't even list them all, Brian. I have industry background in a variety of things. Probably the one I have least industry experience in is manufacturing. But again, going back to what I said before, all business owners have the same problems, and they're not industry specific. They are just inherent problems with owning a business. And that's why I really feel like our niche is not industry specific, it's people specific. If you're a business owner and you are in a privately held situation, and I say that because if you're beholden to shareholders as a publicly traded company, you have a board, you have shareholders, it's a different focus. But if you're a small to mid-sized business that typically starts as a family business or a sole proprietor, you're going to have the same problems as you grow and as you experience some of the complexities that we're dealing with now and dealing with before this crisis, we can definitely help no matter what.
So could you list two or three things that small to medium sized businesses don't do that you think could help them with their bottom line?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have all the normal stuff, but one of the three things that I think of that come to right to the top of my mind that may not be popular, I guess is the word I want to use. Not seeking to continuously improve is the first one. Especially in a booming economy like we had prior to this coronavirus craziness, it's really easy to get into a false sense of security and to continuously do what got you to where you were. It is extraordinarily important for businesses to continually look at every process, look at every interaction, and have to make it as efficient and as effective as possible. The second thing, and it goes along with the first one, is not creating a culture of innovation. As the leader, your primary job is to define the mission and then motivate your employees and empower them to complete the mission. So if you can empower your staff to think beyond what has historically been done and getting them focused on continuously improving and innovating, and be humble enough, is probably the best way to say it, Brian. Leaders have to be humble enough to say, hey, you know what? I built this, it's my baby, but I've got somebody over here that I hired that is actually a better at XYZ and can help me improve my business. There's a book by Ed Catmull, who was the CEO of Pixar, called The Creativity Inc. He does a great job of explaining how he set up and protected the innovation even when they got bought by Disney. One of his requirements when they got bought was, we have to still have the ability to innovate and create and have space for our employees to do so. And then the third thing is now I've got a degree in accounting. So what I'm about to say is going to really annoy all of my accounting friends. And I've spent almost 30 years as a CFO, but not getting focused too heavily on the financial statements. Now, again, everybody's going to be freaking out. What do you mean we don't have to look at the financial statements? There are key drivers of every business that are unique to that business. For example, the custom cabinet making company that I work with, they've had that business for 20 some years. It's a family run business. I can sit down with them and talk to them about their P&L and balance sheet all day long. But that is not what they do every day. That's not what they see every day. You can't go to work every day, talk to your employees and say, hey, how's my P&L doing? It's just not something that's ingrained in the way they do their work. So what I do with them is say, okay, what are the things that if you're doing this, all of the P&L stuff will work itself out. So we sit down, we spend a ton of time with our clients to really understand how they do business, what those drivers are. For the custom cabinet maker, it's number of cabinet fronts per week. Now, without sitting down and without exploring that and without defining those things, it'd be very difficult to understand that. It's easy, really easy, just to say, hey, here's your top line, here's your bottom line. You have to increase both of them. But for me to go in now and say, I need you to focus on and be efficient in processing 1,800 cabinet fronts a week. That's something tangible that the owner can roll out to his employees. That's understandable. That then they can say, as long as we're hitting that mark, we're doing fantastic. Now, we have our monthly financial meetings. It's nice and easy, but he knows every day when he's walking in there, okay, I got to be working towards 1,800 cabinets a week or 1,800 fronts a week. And if I can get to 1,800, I'm golden. So I think creating those metrics and understanding what those metrics are is crucially important for especially small to mid-sized businesses, and very few of them do that well. Does that answer your question, Brian?
It does. It does. That's a lot of good feedback there. So this time is really unprecedented for most of us going through this. What's the advice you're giving to all the companies that you're advising when it comes to reopening during this time?
Yeah, it is. It's super interesting, and I find it fascinating how the different states are handling it too. So that makes it a little more interesting. You know, I work with Pat in Delaware, which has completely different rules as my clients in North Carolina, as my clients in South Carolina, as my clients in Florida. So what I've been really working hard with people on, one, as I said before, your primary role as a leader is to define the mission and motivate your employees. So I go back to, you know, those of us who know Marcus Lemonis and his companies. He's all about people, process, and product.
And that's the
And
host of what?
he's the host of the show The Profit on
Yes.
CNBC. And it's simple when you say it out loud: people, process, and product. But it is truly the fundamentals that you have to really have a handle on as you're coming out of being quarantined for 2 or 3 months at a time. Everybody's going to be scared. Your employees are worried about their jobs. They're worried about a resurgence. They're watching the news and getting conflicting reports. Your job as the leader, number one, is to instill confidence in your staff, because confidence in your staff, if they feel confident that we're moving down a path towards our mission, they're going to be confident with their customers. And there is nothing more important when it comes to reopening and reestablishing your sales pipeline as confidence that, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be selling. You're going to be able to get your product. You're going to be able to get your service. It's all good. So I think first is everybody needs to breathe and just redefine the mission, understand where you're going, and motivate your employees. Secondly, I think you have to understand, again, that the way you go to market may be different. You may have to modify the products and services you offer. You know, again, going back to the custom cabinet maker, he may have to change his delivery method because people don't want, and storefronts don't want that interaction. They may be closed. There may be stuff, for example, the factory is a perfect example. There's still going to be social distancing rules for a period of time. So my coach to Pat and his team was, okay, what can we do from a virtual standpoint to still allow our services and our brand to go forward, but to also comply with the rules and regulations that we're certainly dealing with. Again, nobody wants to be the company, especially on a very customer forward company like the factory. Nobody wants to be the one that says, hey, we opened, everything was normal, and then somebody got, coronavirus. So being willing, it goes back to innovating, right, Brian? Again, the first thing we talked about.
Yep.
Being willing to talk about and think about different ways to provide your goods and services. And lastly, I think, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm a process guy, even though I'm an accountant. Everybody thinks I should have been an engineer, including my family. It's super weird. But you have a lot of people working remote, right?
Yeah.
Take this time to look at how you do what you do. Again, it goes back to that false sense of security. When you're growing and you're in growth mode, it's always about forward. It's always about go, 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 go. What's the next thing? What's the next product? What's the next service? How do we make this product better? Oftentimes, your infrastructure just gets bloated with waste. Take this time now to attack all those issues that are minor in scope when you're growing, but can now be magnified and taken care of while you're sitting at home, working from home. Because we all know we don't have a commute anymore. So you've got at least an extra hour in your day that you could do something with. So attack those little things. Again, it comes down to the leader being willing to say, here is where we stand. Here is where our mission is. Let us think about ways to get to our mission quicker and better and more efficiently. And I think one of the things I had a mentor of mine say to me when I got into the consulting and coaching business was, your biggest obstacle is going to be an unwillingness for leaders unwilling to change. And I sat back and I was like, why would they not be willing to change if they know something's wrong? And he said, because, there's pride involved and you're basically calling their baby ugly. So my role as an advisor is to get on the same side of the table with the business owner and say, all right, let us look at our business, not let me look at your business. To really break down the walls of the ego and say, you called me because there was something wrong. So that when we go into how do we come out of this pandemic, let's take a wholesale look at where you are. Let's really define where you want to be, and then let's create a plan how to get there. So motivate your people, make sure they're on mission, understand how to innovate and deliver your products differently. And that is an overlooked piece. Everybody talks about it, but very few people do it well. Thinking about the factory specifically, if they're able to create a virtual training program, it now becomes a national company, not a regional company.
Definitely.
So there's expansion opportunity there, and being willing to kind of step out and say, this is what we have to do in order to stay in business.
Now, not every company is going to be able to do that. It would be tough. It wouldn't be as easy for the company that makes the cabinets, like you mentioned, to become a nationwide company. They've
Correct.
got to really increase production on that front.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, let's think about the international nonprofit that I work with. Our business model is based upon doing serving events all across the country in schools. Well, none of the schools are open. None of the schools want any outside people coming in. We had about 80% of our business that happens between May 1st and October 1st that now is going away completely. So we sat down as a leadership team and said, all right, well, this could be over. Like if we lose 80% of our revenue in a given year, how do we come out of that? Can we come out of that? So like I think where you were going with that is, what happens if you can't innovate? What happens if you're stuck and all of a sudden you're bleeding cash every 5 minutes and you don't know where to turn?
So a topic that not a lot of companies want to talk about. It's really hard to kind of face this. Like you mentioned, it's almost like you're calling their baby ugly. Bankruptcy. I think a lot of companies are going to be facing that thought coming out of this, or even in a year to come. But can you kind of give me and the listeners your thought process on when you should consider it, when you should pull the trigger on that?
Boy, that's a tough one, because in addition to being an accountant by trade, and this is probably oxymoronic at some degree, I'm also an eternal optimist. So I'm always of the opinion that there's a way forward to get out of the mess that you're in.
And you never fail until you quit. So that's
very true.
Yeah.
That is an outstanding way to look at it. But having said that, there are times when it is not prudent to move forward in the same way you're moving forward before. When should you pull the trigger? At the point when your personal assets are at risk, I think is the key to that whole thing. And I think bankruptcy is a situation where if you're being sued by creditors, if you are just not paying any bills at all, and you have no prospect of selling any assets, there's always a plan. If you're an asset heavy business, for example, the cabinet maker, they have tons of inventory, whether it's lumber or parts or equipment, they have tons of assets. If they were to get into a situation where, the real estate market falls apart, which I think it could over the next, 6 months, being willing to say, okay, what assets can we sacrifice? What purchases can we delay? How can we get rid of old inventory to kind of buffet and weather the storm? I think what people have to understand today is this is a temporary situation. Yes, you may have to contract as a business, but it's not going to go on for 6 more months. If your business is that vulnerable and is that short on cash, there was probably some inherent problems anyway. And I know I'm kind of skirting the issue about when to declare bankruptcy, but I think if you've got personal assets at risk and your business is completely dead in the water, not selling, not being able to offload any inventory, not being able to get any relief from the banks, and or personal investment from friends, family. If you're starting to dip into credit cards and paying credit cards with other credit cards and dipping into family assets where you're taking a second mortgage on your home, it may be time to think about and talk to your accountant and your attorney about filing for business protection under the bankruptcy laws, because there's essentially Chapter 13 bankruptcy for that's personal, or Chapter 11 for business, allows you to put a stop to the credit calls, put a stop to the foreclosures, and create a plan to move forward. The difficulty with that, and the reason why I'm so, I don't want to say against, so hesitant to go down that road, is there's a stigma behind bankruptcy, and it will be attached to you personally as the owner and will be attached to your company forever. So if you're getting to the point where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what else to do, talk to your CPA, talk to your attorney, talk to somebody like me and say, all right, we got to create a plan. Oftentimes, Brian, when you're in the middle of the crisis, I've been saying this a lot to my clients. We need wartime leaders. We need leaders that are not going to break in the midst of crisis. Sometimes what will happen during this time where there's this enormous pressure and this enormous amount of unknown, the pressure creates diamonds, right? You're going to see people that are either going to crumble or you're going to see people that are going to rise to the top. And it's been fascinating to watch in the businesses that I work with, those people who have been on the periphery or in a lower level position that in the midst of this crisis have really risen to the top and shown the owner that, hey, you know what? I can be your next go-to person. So I think there's opportunity there. Rally around your mission. You got into this business for a reason. You felt very strongly that you could fill a need and make money. It's not make money and fill a need. And that's important. You got into business. When people sit down and say, what kind of business do I want to start? The first thing you'd understand is, what am I bringing? What are my gifts and talents? What am I good at? And where does that fit in the market? What hole can I fill? What need can I meet? It's not, here's my gifts and talents and how do I sell them? If you start out with, here's what I can do, how do I sell that? You're always going to be chasing. If you build your foundation of your business on, here's what I can do and here's how it meets a need in the market, you will always be needed and always be able to build a foundation that makes money, but also has an impact in the community.
So if I was to really make a reach and try to use your wartime leaders and combine that with bankruptcy, could you look at bankruptcy as kind of retreating to fight another day?
Yes, I think that's a great analogy, and I appreciate you doing that, because I get off on this little tangent because I truly don't believe bankruptcy is a viable option. And I'm just going to be perfectly straight with you. I think if you get to the point where there's desperation, and you shouldn't get to that point if you have good people around you. If you get to the point where you're using personal assets and you're using credit cards to pay credit cards, and you're bankrupting and you're taking mortgages out on your house to support a business that's going nowhere, yes, filing for a Chapter 13 personally or a Chapter 11 business to stop the bleeding and be able to create a plan to pay creditors is absolutely a retreat to fight another day. But I think you can do that, Brian, without having to go through the formal process. Talk to your creditors, especially now where it's not like it's a specific company. We're talking about the entire world is affected by this. I just saw an article that 70% of the businesses in Dubai are going to close in the next month. 70. So everybody's affected by this shutdown of the country. Talk to your creditors, because I can assure you, if you call your landlord and say, hey, I can't pay for the next 2 months, but we can tack it on to the back end of our lease, they would much rather have some assurances that you're going to be around than just, all right, we're folding the business, because they're losing revenue as well. Yep. So talk to your creditors, negotiate some payment plans, and I think we can manage our way and sell our way out of the current crisis.
Now, you working with companies, I don't think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you've had to change your process in terms of communication a lot. You mentioned that you've worked with companies in Florida, I believe. And you work with Pat in Delaware to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Are you open for taking new customers?
Oh, always, always. The cool thing, and I am very much a in-person, shake your hand, sit literally next to you at the table kind of guy. I'm a huge whiteboard guy. So absolutely, I prefer, and I'm willing to travel to sit next to somebody. But it's been interesting as this thing has gone on, that conversations like this on Zoom have been really helpful. I have a call at 11 with a custom cabinet maker. Now he's an hour down the road, and normally I'd go sit in his office and we'd work it out. But what I found very interesting, it's again about efficiency. It's much more efficient for me to call on a Zoom call and be able to share my screen and do the work there, to be able to talk to people all across the country and all across the world. So absolutely willing to have conversations with, and a shameless plug, obviously the first call that we have is on us. We're just trying to understand who we are as a collaborative opportunity. I feel very strongly, and I said this before, that it's a we, not a you and I. Once you become a client of Advocatus Consulting, we are part of your team. It's never going to be well, I just told them to do that and I'm going to walk away. Consultants get a bad rap about coming in, telling you what to do, not really understanding your business, and just walking away. That is not who I am, who the company is, and how we do business. We want to understand fully how you're currently doing business, understand your customers, understand your people, and really create a wholesale program to help you do what you do better.
So I'm going to leave some links below on how people can reach you, but if you could let the listeners know how to do that, and anything else you'd like them to hear.
Oh, I appreciate that very much, Brian. Again, I think the biggest thing I can tell people right now is don't panic. Don't panic. If you're a business owner, your job is to help your employees and your customers have the confidence that you still have it under control. Whether you don't internally, you have to project it externally. That's why people like me exist. Let me be your sounding board. Let me be your wartime concierge, to use a term from The Godfather, to just kind of rally around you and help you manage your business. Brian's going to leave the exact spelling of my website on there. It's advocatusconsulting.com. My direct cell phone number, and don't hesitate to call me on my direct cell phone number, is 704-685-2194. and we will set up some time to sit down to talk via Zoom or talk in person as the regulations allow. My email address is scott.woods@advocatusconsulting.com. There's also you can find me on LinkedIn. There's a variety of ways to find me. And if you get stuck, reach out to Brian and he'll hook you up and we'll get something together.
You got it. Scott, thank you very much for hopping on this call with me, and I hope you're doing well with everything, and we will talk soon.
Brian, you're the man. Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thank you, too.
Take care.